The Galactic Transit Station on Prime was one of the busiest places in the known universe. Every day, thousands of beings from hundreds of different worlds passed through its shining halls. There were tall creatures and short ones, beings made of crystal and beings made of smoke, species with 10 eyes and species with none at all. The station never slept. It hummed with life at every hour. But in the central waiting area, surrounded by all this movement and noise, there was a strange, empty space. It was like a bubble of silence in an ocean of sound. Ra sat alone. She was, and that single fact explained everything. Her skin was pale lavender, soft like flower petals, with a gentle glow that came from within. She had 4 eyes, 2 large ones in the front and 2 smaller ones on the sides of her head. When light hit them at certain angles, they reflected like mirrors, and this made other species look away in discomfort. They had been called many terrible things over the past 300 years. Parasites, emotion thieves, mind feeders. A long time ago, during the first meeting between thee and the galactic community, something went wrong. The details had been lost to history, but the fear remained. People believed that they could drain your feelings, steal your happiness, feed on your joy, and leave you empty. The science said this was not true. Many studies had proven that were simply empaths. They could feel what others felt, yes, but they did not take anything. They did not steal. But facts are weak things when placed against 300 years of fear and hatred. 12 seats surrounded Ra in a circle. Every single one was empty. She watched as travelers approached her section of the waiting area. She saw the exact moment when they noticed her. Their steps would slow. Their expressions would change. Sometimes it was disgust. Sometimes it was fear. Sometimes it was a cold, practiced blankness that was somehow worse than open hatred. Then they would turn and walk away, finding seats on the other side of the station, even if those seats were uncomfortable or far from their departure gates. A mother with 3 small children saw the empty seats and started walking toward them. Then she saw Ra. She grabbed her children and pulled them close, hurrying away as if she had seen a dangerous animal. A merchant, his scales gleaming under the station lights, actually hissed at her as he passed. The sound was sharp and cruel. Ra kept her 4 eyes fixed on her data tablet. She pretended to read. She pretended not to notice. She pretended that the ache in her chest was simply hunger and nothing more. She was traveling to her sister's memorial service. Had died 3 weeks ago, and Ra had been trying to get home ever since. But transport companies did not like passengers. They worried about other customers complaining. They worried about losing business. One company had told her directly that her kind made people uncomfortable, and they could not risk their reputation. So she traveled alone, on the cheapest tickets, through the longest routes, always sitting in the emptiest sections, always surrounded by empty chairs that screamed louder than any insult. The station announcement system crackled to life. A calm voice informed all travelers that a gravitational storm had formed along the primary transit route. All departures would be delayed for approximately 3 hours. 3 more hours of this. Ra closed her eyes. She thought of who had always been braver than her, would have stood up and announced herself proudly, would have challenged the fearful looks with a smile, but was gone now, and Ra was alone, and she did not have enough bravery left for both of them. She felt him before she saw him. This was one of the things her species could do. They could sense the emotional presence of others like a kind of warmth or pressure. Most beings in the station felt like static, a jumbled mess of impatience and boredom and low-grade irritation. But this presence was different. It was warm and steady, like a fire on a cold night. It was calm and unafraid. Ra opened her eyes. A human male was walking directly toward her section. He appeared to be around 30 years old by the human counting system, with dark brown skin and eyes that seemed naturally kind. He carried a worn travel bag over one shoulder and held a paper cup of something that released small curls of steam. His clothes were simple and slightly wrinkled. the look of someone who had been traveling for a long time. The other travelers in the station watched him. Ra could feel their attention shifting, their curiosity building. They were waiting for the moment when the human would notice her, when he would realize his mistake, when he would turn and walk away like everyone else. The human did not turn. He did not slow down. He walked straight up to the seat, directly beside Ra, and stopped. "This seat taken?" he asked. His voice was pleasant and casual, as if this was the most normal question in the world, as if there was nothing unusual about a human wanting to sit next to a. Ra's secondary eyes blinked in confusion, a gesture that humans probably could not read but that she could not control. "You do know what I am." The human smiled. It was a small smile, not showy or dramatic, but it reached all the way to his eyes. "I know you look like someone who could use some company during a long delay." He sat down before she could respond. He moved easily, comfortably, as if the empty seats around them meant nothing at all. He set his bag on the floor and took a sip from his paper cup. He said, "Cole." Ra did not know what to say. She had prepared herself for many things today. She had prepared for hatred and fear and cold silence. She had not prepared for this. She did not have a response ready for simple kindness. "I am Ra," she finally managed. "Nice to meet you," Ra took another sip of his drink and settled back in his seat. 3 hours, huh? Gravitational storms are the worst. You never know how long they'll actually last. Around them, the station continued to buzz with activity, but something had changed. The empty seats around them seemed less empty now. The silence seemed less heavy. And for the first time in a very long time, Ra did not feel completely alone. She did not understand this human. She did not understand why he had chosen to sit here, why he seemed so unbothered by what she was, why his emotional presence remained so steady and warm. But she was grateful, and for now that was enough. For the first hour they barely spoke. Sat beside her, drinking from his paper cup and reading something on a small device. He did not stare at her. He did not ask strange questions about her biology or her abilities. He did not treat her like a dangerous animal that might attack at any moment. He simply sat there, existing peacefully in the space beside her, as if this was completely normal. Ra did not know what to do with this. She had spent so many years being watched with suspicion that she had forgotten what it felt like to simply be ignored in a comfortable way. She went back to her own data tablet, but she could not focus on the words. Her attention kept drifting to the human beside her, trying to understand him. The drink in his cup was called coffee, he had explained when she asked. It was a mild stimulant made from plants that grew on Earth. Humans drank it to stay awake and alert. He offered to get her some, but she declined politely. She did not know how human drinks would affect her body. What struck her most was how relaxed he seemed. His emotional presence never wavered. It remained warm and steady like a small sun. There was no hidden fear, no secret disgust that he was trying to mask. He simply was not afraid of her, and this fact amazed her more than anything else. The other travelers in the station could not stop staring at him. She felt their attention like a weight on her skin. They whispered to each other. They pointed when they thought no one was watching. Some of them looked confused. Some of them looked angry, as if was breaking some important rule by sitting next to her. A few of them looked almost curious, as if they were wondering what would happen next. Then one of them decided to do something about it. A diplomat approached their section. They were a species made partly of living crystal, and this one's face was arranged in an expression of serious concern. He was tall and elegant, wearing the formal robes of his office, and he clearly believed he was about to do a good deed. "Human," he said, his voice low and careful. "You may not be aware of this, but the creature sitting beside you is. They are known to feed on emotional energy. For your own safety, and I strongly suggest that you relocate to another section of the station." Looked up from his device. His expression remained pleasant and calm, but something shifted behind his eyes. Ra felt a new emotion enter his presence. It was controlled and quiet, but it was definitely anger. "First," said, his voice still friendly but with a new edge to it, "her name is Ra, not the creature. Second, the parasitic feeding myth was officially disproven by the Galactic Science Council in the year 2847. I can send you the research documents if you like. Third, I am exactly where I want to be." He paused and smiled, though the smile did not quite reach his eyes this time. "But thank you for your concern." The diplomat's crystal face flickered with surprise and embarrassment. He opened his mouth, closed it again, and then retreated without another word. Several nearby travelers quickly looked away, pretending they had not been watching. Ra felt something she had not experienced in many years. It took her a moment to identify it. It was not her own emotion. It was coming from, it was indignation, fierce and protective, and it was directed at the diplomat on her behalf. Someone was angry for her. Someone was defending her. This was so unexpected that her bioluminescence flickered, her lavender skin briefly glowing brighter before settling back to its normal soft light. "You did not have to do that," she said quietly. "No," agreed. "I wanted to." He took another sip of his coffee, and his emotional presence slowly returned to its usual warmth. "If you don't mind me asking, where are you headed?" It was such a simple question. People asked it all the time in transit stations. "Where are you going? Where are you coming from?" Small talk to pass the time. But something about the way asked it, something about the genuine interest in his voice, made Ra want to answer honestly. "My sister passed away," she said. "I am returning home for her memorial service." His expression changed. The casual friendliness was replaced by something gentler, something deeper. "I'm sorry to hear that. Were you close?" The question unlocked something inside her. Perhaps it was the warmth of his presence. Perhaps it was the fact that he had defended her without being asked. Perhaps she was simply tired of carrying her grief alone, tired of having no one to share it with. "She was everything to me," Ra said. Her voice cracked slightly on the last word. "She was the only one who ever truly saw me. She never saw me as what others said I was. She just saw me as her sister." Did not offer empty words of comfort. He did not say things like, "She's in a better place now," or "Time heals all wounds." Instead, he set down his coffee cup and turned to face her more directly. "Tell me about her," he said. "What was her name?" And Ra did. She told him about brilliant, stubborn, fearless, who had refused to accept the lies told about their species, had become a specifically to prove those lies wrong. She had spent her entire adult life studying biology, documenting exactly how their empathic abilities worked, proving scientifically that they could not drain or steal emotions from other beings. She had submitted her research to the Galactic Science Council 47 times. 47. Each time they rejected it, she went back and gathered more evidence, made her arguments stronger, found new ways to explain the truth. And finally, they had listened. The council had changed the official classification of the species from empathic parasites to empathic sensitives. It was a small change in words, but it meant everything. "She sounds like an extraordinary person," said when Ra finished. She was. Ra's voice was steady now, strengthened by the telling. "And I have spent so long being afraid of the galaxy she tried to change that I forgot to be proud of her. I forgot to be brave like she was." Nodded slowly. "Being brave is hard, especially when the whole universe seems to be against you." "How do you do it?" Ra asked. "How are you not afraid to sit here with me?" Was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. "I learned a long time ago that fear is a choice, not the feeling itself, but what you do with it. You can let it control you, or you can acknowledge it and do the right thing anyway." Around them, neither of them noticed, something strange had begun to happen. Other travelers had started drifting closer. Not in a threatening way, but curiously, carefully, drawn by the unusual sight of a human and a talking peacefully together. A young child of a species Ra did not recognize had crept close enough to hear parts of their conversation. An elderly being with weathered gray skin had tears running down their face, clearly moved by the story of struggle. They had been listening, and something in them had begun to change. The second hour changed everything. It started with the woman. Her species was tall and with gleaming shells and delicate antennae that moved constantly to read the air. They were known for being quiet and private. They communicated mostly through chemicals and small gestures, rarely speaking aloud. They almost never approached strangers. But this walked directly up to Ra. She moved slowly, hesitantly, as if she was fighting against her own nature to do this. In her upper hands, she held a small package wrapped in dark cloth. "For morning," she said in a clicking voice. The words were simple and short, but the meaning was clear. "Our custom, gift for loss." She paused, her antennae trembling slightly. "I am sorry for your sister." Ra accepted the package with trembling hands. She could feel the emotions coming from the woman. There was nervousness, yes, and a deep discomfort at speaking to a stranger. But there was also genuine sympathy and something that felt like shame. Shame for having sat so far away. Shame for having been afraid. Before Ra could respond, the woman retreated. But she did not retreat far. She took a seat just 3 chairs away, her body positioned so that she was facing Ra, watching, protecting. It was such a small gesture, but it meant so much. Then came others. The parent of the child who had crept close to listen approached next. They were the same species as the merchant who had hissed at Ra earlier. Their scales were a deep green, and they shifted color slightly with their emotions, flickering between green and an embarrassed purple. "I pulled my child away from you when we arrived," they said. Their voice was quiet with shame. "I was taught from birth to fear your kind. My parents feared you. Their parents feared you. It was simply what we believed." They paused, their scales flickering faster. "But I have been watching. I have seen how you grieve the same way anyone grieves. I have seen this human show courage that I do not have, and I realize that I was wrong." They bent their head in a gesture that Ra recognized as an apology. "I would ask for your forgiveness," they said. Ra felt tears forming in her eyes. Tears were slightly luminescent, glowing faintly as they fell. "There is nothing to forgive," she said, and she meant it completely. "You did not create the lies. You were only taught to believe them." The scales shifted to a warmer color, something like relief mixed with gratitude. They guided their child forward, and the young one looked up at Ra with wide, curious eyes. "She glows," the child whispered in amazement. "Mother, she glows like stars." "She does," the parent agreed softly. "She is beautiful, isn't she?" Watched all of this unfold with a quiet smile on his face. When Ra glanced at him, trying to understand what was happening, he simply shrugged. "Humans have an old saying," he said. "Be the change you want to see in the world. I've never found prejudice to be particularly useful, so I try not to practice it." "Do humans not have prejudice among yourselves?" Ra asked. It was a genuine question. She did not know much about Earth or its people. Laughed, but it was a complex sound. There was old pain beneath the humor. "Oh, we invented prejudice. We spent thousands and thousands of years perfecting it. We discriminated against each other based on skin color, based on gender, based on religion, based on which piece of land you happened to be born on." He shook his head slowly. "We drew lines in the dirt and then killed each other over which side of the line was better." Ra was horrified. "How did you survive as a species?" "We almost didn't, several times." His expression grew thoughtful. "But that's exactly why I recognized what was happening when I walked into this station. I know what it looks like when everyone has decided to hate someone before meeting them. I've seen it. I've experienced it." "Because of your skin color?" Ra asked carefully. "Among other things," nodded. "My grandmother survived something called Jim Crow in a place called the American South on Earth. It was a system designed to treat people like her as less than human, simply because of how she looked. She lived through things that would break most people. His voice softened with love and memory. But she came out of it believing that the most powerful thing a person could do in a hateful world was to show stubborn, determined kindness. She taught me that sitting next to someone who is being shunned is a revolutionary act. The delay announcement updated over the station speakers. 1 hour remained until departures resumed. By now, a small crowd had gathered around their section of the waiting area. It was not threatening or aggressive. People stood at a respectful distance, watching, listening. Some of them had been there for a while. Others had just arrived, drawn by whispered stories spreading through the station. The human who sat down, people were calling it. Did you hear about the human who sat next to the... A small drone appeared in the air nearby. Ra recognized it as a galactic news recording device. Someone was documenting what was happening. "This is getting out of hand," she murmured too. "Do you want me to tell them to leave?" he asked immediately. "I can ask them to give us privacy." She considered the offer. Part of her wanted to hide, to shrink away from all this attention. That was what she had always done. That was what felt safe. But then she thought of... Her sister had spent her whole life trying to show the galaxy that we're not monsters. She had fought against ignorance and fear with science and patience. She had believed that if people simply learned the truth, they would stop being afraid. And now, here in this transit station, people were learning. "No," Ra said slowly. "Let them watch. Let them see what my sister always wanted them to see." She sat up, her skin glowing a little brighter. "Let them see that we are simply people." A child, not much older than the one, broke away from their parent and ran up to Ra. The parent tried to grab them, panic clear on their crystal face, but the child was too fast. "Your eyes are pretty," the child announced loudly. "Can you really feel what other people feel? That must be confusing. I get confused just with my own feelings." Ra smiled, her first genuine smile of the day. "It can be confusing sometimes," she admitted. "But it also helps me understand people. I can tell when someone is sad even if they don't say it, and then I can try to help them feel better." "That sounds nice," the child decided. "I wish I could do that." Their parent finally reached them and scooped them up with embarrassed apologies. But the child was waving at Ra as they were carried away, and their parent's crystal face had shifted from fear to something more complicated. Something that looked almost like reconsideration. The ripples were spreading. One small act of kindness, one human choosing to sit in an empty chair, had started a wave that was moving through the station. Finished his coffee and crushed the cup in his hand. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "my grandmother always said that hate is loud but kindness is patient. Hate makes a lot of noise, but kindness just keeps showing up day after day until eventually the noise runs out." Ra looked at the crowd around them, at the beings who had come to watch, at the children who had learned something new today. "Your grandmother sounds like she was a wise person." "She was the best person I ever knew," said simply. "She died a few months ago. I was at her memorial when I started this journey home." Ra felt his grief then, a deep blue sadness beneath the warm steadiness of his presence. He was mourning too. He had been mourning this whole time, and yet he had still chosen to sit beside a stranger who looked lonely. "I am sorry for your loss," she said, and the words carried the weight of true understanding. "Thank you," smiled sadly. "She would have liked you. She would have said you have a good heart." The minutes continued to pass, and the crowd continued to watch, and somewhere in the galaxy, change was beginning. The final hour became something no one expected. Word had spread through the entire station now. Beings who had no business in the central waiting area found excuses to pass through. Travelers changed their routes just to catch a glimpse of what was happening. The news drone had been joined by 2 others, their small lights blinking as they recorded everything. Then the elder arrived. The crowd parted for them immediately. They were one of the founding species of the Allied systems. They had been traveling between stars when most other species were still living in caves. Their word carried weight that few others could match. This particular elder was ancient even by standards, their body bent with age, their skin covered in patterns that told the story of their long life. They moved slowly through the crowd, leaning on a staff made of some dark, polished wood. Every being they passed bowed their head in respect. When they finally reached Ra, they stopped and studied her with eyes that had seen centuries. "I knew of your sister's work," the elder said. Their voice was deep and rough, like wind moving through caves. "I was on the Galactic Science Council that eventually changed the classification of your species." Ra's breath caught in her throat. "You were there." "I was there for all 47 of her submissions." The elder's ancient eyes held something that looked like pain. "I voted against her the first 46 times. I believed what I had been taught. I believed the old fears and the old lies. It was easier than questioning what I thought I knew." The crowd had gone completely silent. Even the children stood still. When she submitted for the 47th time, she included something new, a personal letter. She wrote about growing up as a child in a galaxy that feared her. She wrote about the pain of being called a monster by people who had never met her. She wrote about her sister, who was so afraid of the outside world that she barely left their home planet. The elder looked directly at Ra now, and she realized with a shock that they were talking about her, had written about her. "That letter changed my mind," the elder continued. "I realized that I had been voting against a person, not a policy. I had been too coward to see the truth that was right in front of me." They bent their head low, lower than an elder had any need to bow. "I was wrong, and I am sorry." Ra did not know what to say. Here was one of the most respected beings in the galaxy, apologizing to her in front of hundreds of witnesses. She felt tears flowing down her face again, luminescent and warm. "Thank you," she managed to whisper. "No," the elders shook their head firmly. "Thank your sister. She had more courage than I ever did. And thank this human." They turned to look at with something like wonder in their ancient eyes. "He has reminded an old fool of something important. That change does not begin with councils or policies or official declarations. It begins with choosing to sit in an empty chair." The elder turned to address the crowd. "Among my people, we have a word for what this human has done today. We call it," the word sounded like music, like something sacred. "It means one who makes room. One who sees someone being pushed out and makes space for them. One who stands against the current of fear and says, 'No, there is place here.'" The elder bowed too, and the entire crowd gasped. A elder had not bowed to a human in recorded history. Shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his emotional presence flickered with embarrassment. "I really didn't do anything special," he said. "I just sat down." "Exactly," the elder replied. "You just sat down, and in doing so you showed us who we have forgotten to be." A commotion at the edge of the crowd caught Ra's attention. A young male was pushing through the gathered beings, his lavender skin pale with worry. She recognized him immediately. "Ren," she breathed, her nephew's son, sent ahead to meet her transport. "Aunt Ra," Ren broke through the crowd and stopped, staring at the scene before him, at the hundreds of beings gathered around, at the elder, at the news drones, at the human sitting calmly beside his aunt. "What is happening? I heard there was some kind of incident and I was so worried." "There is no incident," Ra said, and she was surprised to find herself smiling. "I made a friend, and it seems that friendship has reminded some people of things they had forgotten." The transport boarding call finally sounded through the station. After 3 hours of delay, the gravitational storm had passed and departures were resuming. All around them, beings began gathering their belongings and moving toward their gates. But something remarkable happened. Instead of the usual chaos, travelers formed an orderly path. They were specifically making room for Ra to board first, clearing a way for her to pass. She stood slowly, still holding the morning gift from the woman. Her legs felt unsteady. stood too. He picked up his worn travel bag and slung it over his shoulder. "Safe travels, Ra," he said. "I hope the memorial service brings you peace. I hope you can celebrate your sister the way she deserved." Ra faced him, this strange and wonderful human who had seen an empty chair and filled it without hesitation. She thought of all the words in all the languages she knew, and none of them seemed big enough. "Cole," she said slowly, "I do not have words in your language or mine to say what you have given me today. You gave me something I had lost. You reminded me that kindness still exists." "Then don't try to use words," replied with a gentle smile. "Just remember this day, and maybe someday when you see someone sitting alone, you can be the one who sits in the empty seat." Ra felt a pull inside her, an urge to do something her species rarely did with outsiders. Among the physical contact was sacred. It was how they shared their deepest selves. They almost never touched beings from other species. But today was a day for breaking old rules. She reached out and gripped his forearm. He looked surprised but did not pull away. Then Ra did something that her sister had always believed would change everything. She allowed a single pulse of emotion to pass through their connection. It was not fear or hunger or any of the dark things the galaxy believed about her kind. It was pure, golden gratitude. It was warmth and hope and the feeling of not being alone. It flowed from her heart through her hand and into him, a gift freely given. Gasped, his eyes went wide. For a moment he could feel exactly what she felt. He could feel the depth of her thanks, her relief, her newfound hope. It was overwhelming and beautiful, like standing in sunlight after years in the dark. "That," Ross said as she released him, "is what actually share. We do not take, we give." There were tears in his eyes now. "That was beautiful," he whispered. "That was the most beautiful thing I've ever felt." My sister believed that if people could simply experience the truth, they would stop being afraid. Ross smiled through her own tears. It seemed she was right. She was always right. The final boarding call sounded. Ra looked at her nephew, who was watching all of this with wide, amazed eyes. "Come, Ren. It is time to go home. It is time to celebrate your mother." She walked toward the departure gate, and the crowd parted for her like water around a stone. For the first time in her entire life, Ra walked through a galactic public space with her head held high. Behind her, watched her go, the elder stood beside him. "You have started something today, young human," the elder said quietly. "A wave that will spread far beyond this station." "I just sat down," repeated. "Yes," the elder agreed. "And sometimes that is all it takes. Sometimes the smallest action creates the largest change." The news drones continued to record as Ra disappeared through the departure gate, her nephew beside her, her skin glowing bright with hope. 3 months passed. The footage from Prime Transit Station spread across the Allied systems like wildfire. It started on the news networks, a small story about an unusual incident at a transit station. Then it moved to social sharing platforms. Then it became something larger. People watched the video of walking toward the empty seats. They watched him sit down without hesitation. They watched the diplomat approach and be politely corrected. They watched the woman bring her morning gift. They watched the parent apologize. They watched the elder bow. And something in the collective heart of the galaxy began to shift. They called it the sitting movement at first, though it eventually became known simply as making room. The idea was simple. When you saw someone being isolated, being avoided, being treated as less than a person, you sat beside them. You acknowledged them. You made room. Beings from dozens of species started doing it consciously, deliberately. They sought out the lonely ones in public spaces. They sat beside the avoided ones, the feared ones, the ones who had been pushed to the margins. They asked their names. They listened to their stories. It was not a loud revolution. There were no protests, no marches, no angry speeches. It was a quiet revolution, one empty seat at a time. The Galactic Council took official action 6 weeks after the station incident. They issued a formal apology to the people, not because the science was new. The science had been settled for nearly 200 years. They apologized because they had never actually said they were sorry. They had changed the classification, updated the records, but they had never acknowledged the harm that 3 centuries of fear had caused. It had taken a human sitting in a chair to make them see what had been missing. Ra watched the apology broadcast from her office at the University of Prime. It was the same university where her sister had taught for 30 years. Ra had returned to work there after the memorial service, taking over some of research projects. But now she did so publicly, openly, without hiding her heritage behind closed doors. Students came to her lectures specifically because of who she was. They wanted to learn from the woman who had been at the center of the station incident. They wanted to understand what it meant to make room for others. She kept in contact with. They spoke through video calls every few weeks, sharing the small details of their lives across the vast distance between stars. He had returned to Earth, back to his job as a grief counselor working with military families. He helped people who had lost loved ones, sitting with them in their pain, making room for their sorrow. She asked him once why he had been at Prime that day. He told her the truth. He had been visiting his grandmother's memorial marker at Station Helios 7, where her ashes had been scattered into space. She had always dreamed of seeing the stars, he explained. Growing up in a small town in the American South, she had looked up at the night sky and imagined traveling between the points of light. She never got to do it while she was alive, but had made sure she did it after. A grief counselor who was grieving, Ra observed during one of their calls. "We often become what we needed," replied. "I needed someone to sit beside me once during the hardest time of my life. Someone did, so now I sit beside others." The movement continued to grow. 1 year after the station incident, a researcher presented her findings at the Galactic Science Summit. Her name was Doctor, and she had spent 12 months tracking the impact of the Making Room movement across 17 different star systems. The numbers were remarkable. In systems where the movement had taken hold, reports of discrimination had dropped by almost 40%. Cases of isolation-related illness had decreased significantly. Violence motivated by species-based hatred had fallen to historic lows. But the most important finding was harder to measure. Doctor had interviewed thousands of beings who had participated in the movement, both those who sat and those who had been sat beside. She found that something fundamental had changed in how they saw strangers. They had stopped assuming the worst about beings they did not know. They had started assuming the best. Her research paper had a simple title. She called it the empty seat hypothesis: how one human's act of simple kindness created cascading societal change. The paper opened with a quote from an ancient human civil rights leader. It read, "In the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends." The closing ceremony of the summit was held in a vast auditorium that could seat 10,000 beings. Delegates from every member species of the Allied systems were present. It was one of the largest gatherings in galactic history. At the center of the stage, a single chair had been left empty. Doctor explained its meaning. It represented all the beings who had been pushed to the margins throughout history. It represented everyone who had ever felt alone in a crowded room. It represented the space that fear creates when kindness stays silent. Then she invited the delegates to do something unprecedented. One by one, beings from every species came forward. They did not sit in the empty chair. Instead, they brought their own chairs and placed them beside it. They sat together, surrounding the empty space, filling it not with their bodies but with their presence, their willingness, their choice to make room. A sat beside a sat beside a sat beside a human, species that had been enemies for generations, species that had never spoken to each other, species that had feared and hated and avoided each other, all sat together in a widening circle. The empty chair was no longer alone. Watching from her office through the live broadcast, Ra wept. Her nephew found her there, alarmed by the sight of her tears, until she explained what was happening. "These are not tears of sorrow, child," she said. Her skin glowed bright with emotion. "These are tears of arrival. My sister's dream, the galaxy she gave her life hopping for, it is finally being born." She thought of Cole, probably at home in a place called Atlanta on a planet called Earth. He was probably drinking coffee and reading something on his small device. He was probably completely unaware that his grandmother's stubborn, determined kindness had rippled across star systems and changed the course of galactic history. She opened her communication device and sent him a message. It was only 5 words long. "Thank you for sitting down." His reply came an hour later, crossing the impossible distance between their worlds in a beam of light. "Thank you for making room." Ra read the words and smiled. She saved the message to her permanent files, alongside the research papers her sister had written and the recording of the Galactic Council's apology and all the other artifacts of this remarkable year. Then she stood, put on her coat and walked out of her office. There was a young student sitting alone in the university courtyard. Ra had seen her before. She was a species called from a world recently admitted to the Allied systems. Her people were still seen as outsiders, still treated with suspicion, still avoided. Ra walked over and gestured to the empty space on the bench beside her. "May I sit here?" The student looked up with surprised eyes. "You want to sit with me?" "I do." Ra sat down and smiled. "My name is Ra. What is yours?" Somewhere across the galaxy, the circle grew a little wider. Somewhere, another empty seat was filled, and the galaxy that had dreamed of continued to become real, one small act of kindness at a time. This was humanity's gift to the stars. Not their technology, not their weapons, not their ships that could cross between solar systems in the blink of an eye. Their gift was simpler and more powerful than any of those things. Their gift was the stubborn belief that kindness mattered. Their gift was the courage to sit beside someone who was being ignored. Their gift was the simple, revolutionary act of making room. And it changed everything.